Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in, because today we're tackling a topic that hits absolutely incredibly close to home for so many of us. We're looking at hyper-independence. And I don't just mean liking your alone time, right? We're talking about why this fierce drive to do literally everything yourself is so often a survival shield that you forged in your past. It's a fascinating subject. So let's unpack exactly why asking for help can feel so impossibly difficult.
Be honest with yourself for a second. Do you treat your life, your work, your daily chores like a solo mission? Do you ever find yourself just completely drowning in a massive project, or maybe just struggling to carry a heavy box, but the very thought of asking for help makes you feel like a massive burden?
And then, when someone actually notices you struggling and says, "Hey, do you need a hand?" I bet your brain just immediately shouts, "No, I'm fine." You say it before you even have a split second to think about it, don't you? It's an instant, automatic reflex. It's not that you don't want the help, but something deep inside you just immediately rejects it.
Which brings us to this highly specific yet entirely irrational number. You know who you are. You'd honestly rather spend 3 grueling hours struggling with something completely alone than spend 30 seconds just asking someone for a hand. If that sounds like you, well, welcome to the club. You're definitely not alone, and I promise you, this isn't just because you're stubborn. There's a really deep psychological reason your brain treats asking for help like a dangerous mission.
Part 1. Childhood Emotional Neglect.
So there's this really common belief that you only grow up too fast if your childhood was filled with big, dramatic disasters. But psychologists have found that sometimes the disaster is incredibly quiet. Childhood emotional neglect, or CEN, isn't necessarily about what terrible things happened to you. It's actually about what didn't happen. It's the profound absence of someone noticing your feelings or being emotionally responsive to you when you were small.
Look at the stark contrast here. On the left, we've got that movie-style trauma. You know, the loud, dramatic disasters we're all conditioned to look for. But on the right, we have the reality of CEN, just a profound, quiet loneliness. In homes that lack emotional responsiveness, kids don't have loud stories to point to. They just carry this heavy, invisible weight of their emotional needs being met with total silence.
In environments like that, kids are incredibly smart. They learn so fast that their worth is directly tied to being low maintenance. Maybe you became the hyper-responsible one because you felt you had to save your parents from the discomfort of having a messy, emotional kid. Or maybe when you did occasionally ask for help, you were just told to figure it out. Over time, your developing brain categorized your completely normal needs as a burden. You genuinely started to believe that being good meant being invisible.
To put a face to this, think about characters like Naruto or Beth Harmon from The Queen's Gambit. They didn't start off with loud trauma. They started with a life of profound, quiet loneliness. They were literally forced to create their own strength from scratch because it felt like nobody was coming to save them. They forged a suit of armor out of pure necessity. And if you're a hyper-independent adult right now, you are essentially wearing that exact same armor.
But here's the really heartbreaking reality of that survival strategy. The shield you built to protect yourself when you were little eventually turns into an exhausting, isolating cage in adulthood. Sure, it keeps the danger out, but it also completely blocks out the connection and support you desperately need.
Part 2. Surviving in Swan Mode. This is such a brilliant illustration of what Swan Mode actually feels like. Up on the surface, you look totally graceful, calm, in control. Everyone thinks you've got it all together. But underneath the water, you are paddling frantically just to stay afloat. You are completely exhausted, burnt out, and running on empty.
The real tragedy of Swan Mode is the hidden terror fueling it. You're terrified that if you let someone help you, if you stop paddling so frantically for literally 1 second, the entire performance is going to fall apart. You fear people will finally see that you aren't perfect, that you aren't totally in control, and that you're just as human and needy as everybody else.
Part 3. Rewiring your brain. Okay, so how do we actually fix this? We're going to break this neurological intervention down into 3 totally manageable steps: self-compassion, reframing help, and starting small. These steps are designed to gently teach your nervous system that it is finally safe to build genuine connection. Let's jump into the first one.
So, step 1. When your inner critic is screaming that asking for help makes you weak or a burden, you have to consciously intervene with self-compassion. Remind yourself that you were just a child who deserved to be supported. It wasn't your fault those needs weren't met back then. You are absolutely not broken for having needs today. You're just human.
Step 2 requires a massive perspective shift.
We have to completely reframe what help actually is. Right now, your brain sees help as a personal failure or a sign of weakness. We need to shift that to viewing help as an act of partnership. Because here's a little secret about healthy relationships: people actually want to feel useful. When you constantly say no to help, you're kind of denying someone else the chance to be an anchor for you.
To help with this reframe, try using team language. Instead of feeling like a failure and saying, "I can't do this," say, "We're a team, let's take this off our plate so we can relax together." That brilliantly shifts the whole narrative. It makes accepting help all about building connection, rather than being a referendum on your competence.
Part 4. The act of good enough.
Step 3 is starting small with what we call the radical act of good enough. Look, you don't have to surrender control of your biggest life projects today. Just start with tiny, imperfect actions. Intentionally do a small chore imperfectly. Ask someone to grab you a glass of water. Let someone else pick the movie tonight. I know these seem trivial, but to a hyper-independent brain, letting go of that control is a massive, radical step.
And here's exactly why those tiny steps matter. Every single time you let someone pick the movie or hand you a glass of water and the world doesn't end, you are building what neurologists call associative safety. You're proving to your nervous system through repeated, gentle evidence that you don't have to be in total control to be safe. You're teaching your brain that it is finally okay to rest.
So here is the core takeaway of our explainer today. Healing this trait is not about swinging all the way to the other extreme and becoming completely dependent on everyone else. Healing is about validating your pain. It's realizing that your needs are valid, even if they aren't loud enough to be in a dramatic movie scene. You're allowed to not be okay, and you are absolutely allowed to ask for help.
This is a pretty big journey, and you don't have to do it all at once. If this explainer resonated with you, the source material highly recommends checking out a couple of other resources.
I want to leave you with one final thought as we wrap up. You've been navigating this solo mission for a really long time, gripping the steering wheel so tight your knuckles are white. But today, just for a moment, look around. Who will you let hold the map today? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you really don't have to do it all alone.